Welcome. You're listening to Making Life Brighter, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams, and I'm so excited to have special guests here today. We are going to talk about my favorite subject, the quantum healing field. And the quantum field in general is something that we touch on here at Making Life Brighter, and you know we're all about quantum. So we couldn't have a better guest in better timing, which is all perfect right now. Please welcome Dr. John Ryan. Welcome, Dr. Ryan.
Thanks, Winifred. Thank you very much for inviting me to the program. I'm delighted to be here. And hello to all the audience as well.
That's right. We have a healing audience. We have a quantum audience. We have a worldwide banking type audience. We cover kind of like a whole gamut of different listeners. And I want to point out to the listeners that Dr. John Ryan, can I call you John for the interview?
Absolutely. Yes, please do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, John is a leader in quantum healing, and he has an amazing technique that I can't wait to introduce to you. And he calls it unity field, the unity field healing. And it's a special technique that helps activate your DNA. And we're going to get into that. And he is for sure, in my opinion, a starseed, and he is here on Earth showing the way to what's happening. And he has a very special connection out there, and he's bringing that connection back here. And he's bringing that connection right here to Central New York this April. And also he's doing something very special in September. So stay tuned to find out exactly what's going on. But John, let's first jump in. What is unity field healing?
Perfect. Yeah. So, well, unity field healing it's an energy process that came into being through a series of visions that I was given that kind of taught me a lot of information about healing what we call the 24th chromosome, or the quantum DNA aspect of our genetics, and how to work in this field to evoke healing and transformation at the level of our existence, if you will, or the 3D world. So it's kind of a long story. I'll try to give an abbreviated version just so we have time to talk about lots of other questions. But really, I'd been involved in healing. So my background is in medicine. I'm a certified specialist in diagnostic imaging, so MR, CT interpretation, all that kind of stuff. And so that's kind of been my career, if you will, in traditional medicine. And I still do work in that arena today. But in 1989, I began to have a series of what I later called a Kundalini awakening event, although I had no idea what I was living at the time. It was kind of a series of unusual experience. Oh, sorry. I'm activating my Siri. So what happened was I would be going to bed at night, and I would start to have these out-of-body experiences. I'd begin to like drift out of my body and travel in space. I began to see energy fields around people and chakra energy and different kinds of energetic experiences during conversations and things like that. And so I had no background in healing or esoteric understanding, and this was all very peculiar to me. But what began to happen as this unfolded was I was led to a bookstore through a really unrelenting intuition. I just, every day for a couple of days, I would wake up and I would have this strong, strong intuition to go to a bookstore that I knew of, that I had never been to. And it was a holistic kind of a bookstore. Although back in 1989, there certainly weren't as many books as there are today. But I walked into this store and it was full of books on Eastern philosophy, spirituality, yoga, all these kinds of things. And it was in a house, and every room had kind of a different section of books in it. And I found it overwhelming. I thought, what am I doing here? How am I ever going to find information that will help me here? And what happened was there was a book on the bookshelf that started to glow in light. And I kind of looked at it. I did a little bit of a double take, and I went over and took the book off the shelf. And the name of the book was The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. And so with book in hand,
They have
I
a
thought
way,
I was
don't they?
leaving the store. But then as I turned around, there was a second book it did something a little different. It was, today how you pass your mouse over an icon on your computer and the icon gets bigger. What happened was this book literally magnified itself on the bookshelf. This is really strange. So I went over and I looked at it, and it was a book by Lee Carroll. And it was the very first Kryon book for folks who are familiar with Lee and Kryon. And it was the End Times. And it was the only book that was released back at that point in time. And so I thought, well, I guess I'm supposed to read this book too. So I took both of them, and my life has never kind of been the same after that.
I can imagine you probably had the, okay, it's time for him now. He's ready, and ta-da,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
you got led exactly to. But that's how it happens, right? I mean, here you are in essentially allopathic medicine, and how perfect is that, really? And
Yeah.
you come to this awakening. So yes, and after you got the books, what happened next?
So, I mean, that kind of triggered a whole array of events from that point forward. I became very interested in esoteric healing, and I started to learn about energy and chakras. And I began to understand a little bit the experiences I was having, like what I was actually seeing, and how this ties into the human energy system. And so I began to learn things about that, about various techniques in healing. And then in the early 2000s, I started to have some really powerful meditative experiences. I begin to see a lot of things, not so much looking externally, but when I would close my eyes and go into meditation, I would often be shown things or given pictograms, or aspects of like images that kind of contain what I perceived as coded information. It's almost like it would happen, and I would have to sit with the image and unravel what was contained in all the details of the image, like what the image was of, what color it was, where things were positioned. All this kind of stuff seemed to have relevance in these images. And then as time went on, some of these became very powerful. And I began to have these experiences where dimensions would open in my vision. And I was introduced to this massive DNA molecule one day in a vision. And with it came information or understanding that this represents the chromosome that is really attributed to our soul. And so this is where energy healing and spirituality really start merging together. And as a physician, that kind of took me a little while to get into or to accept, but I couldn't really deny what I was experiencing, beginning to understand. And what I was shown was the mechanics of incarnation. So in essence, it's kind of what happens when a soul is coming back to the earth for an incarnation. And so I would presume a lot of your listeners are familiar with reincarnations.
Yes, I think
I
so.
hope so.
Yes.
Yeah. And so
Yes.
what I was shown was kind of the process by which this happens energetically. And we end up, when the soul is ready to be reborn, what ends up happening is we make choices, if you will, for lack of a better word, in consciousness. We're making choices about what the purpose and meaning of that incarnation is to really be all about. And so we'll want to set ourselves up with probabilities that will encourage us to have the kind of experience that our soul is destined to have in that incarnation. So, for example, if you're going to be a mother, or you're going to be a nurse, or you're going to write a book, or you're going to be a speaker, or these kinds of things, you're going to bring with you attributes or qualities that will support you in that potential when you're born. The other thing we'll bring historically would be karmic kind of energy. So say, for example, we were going to learn about forgiveness, or we were going to learn about letting go, or we were going to learn about overcoming anger, the kinds of things we might attribute to karmic attributes or healing attributes. They would also be kind of woven into the matrix of energy that we would bring with us. And the way that this showed itself forming to me was in an octahedron, like a double-sided diamond pyramid. And all the energy was flowing from this quantum space into the pyramid. And then it merged with a developing fetus that had been chosen by the soul to be the parents for that incarnation. And so as this image unfolded, I was I'm describing it very quickly, but this really unfolded over the course of a year or two, with different aspects to the imagery that was given. And what I subsequently came to understand was the connection between this pyramid and our physical body is through a cord of energy that is a helix. And in essence, it is a helix of energy that mirrors DNA in its structure, but it exists only at a quantum energy level. So it doesn't exist as a physical
In light.
DNA. It's a
Yeah,
quantum.
actually it's oscillating in sound, but we see it as
Exactly.
light from the inside.
Precisely. Precisely. And then what I was shown was, because of the nature of these times, as we go through the shift of the, consciousness that's taking place right now through the ascension or through the process that's occurring on the planet, the communication or the connection that humans hold through this DNA access to the soul, to the higher self, the spiritual realm, if you will, is being expanded. And with that expansion comes all kinds of interesting phenomena. And so some of them are experiences, but others are access to healing, as well as access to attributes and perhaps knowledge or information that a soul has from other incarnations while they were present on the planet. And so it's a complex topic in the sense that as this opens up, many things happen all at once. And it's a little overwhelming, to be honest, for many people if you don't have a sense of what's happening, because all of a sudden you start feeling different. You may have visions or memories of past life experiences that you've had, in other incarnations, or you become really interested in something you were not interested in at all, like a year ago or 2 years ago, or
Like
your
esoteric
life just
healing.
doesn't seem to mirror your energy anymore. It's like, I'm not interested in that, and I don't want to do that anymore, or I'm ready for a career change, or my friendships are unsatisfying and I feel like they're shifting. And so we all go through all kinds of human experiences that are part of that, because what's happening in essence is that the energy, the consciousness that we embody is shifting. And as that happens, of course, it brings us to new interests and the potential for new experiences and new learning, and ultimately awakening to what we really are as spiritual beings, or, divine beings in essence. And so as this work all unfolded, what began to happen was I was shown the possibility to work in this field, in this quantum DNA structure. And I was shown that to do that, we work with a template of light, or a pattern of light that is kind of like a crop circle. It's kind of a structure that looks like circles within circles, but it's spinning an active energy. And when the energy is spinning, it actually looks like yin and yang symbols kind of all through the structure. And so the work attunes the DNA, and then attunes the individual to working with the template. And then we can work in an intentional way with the template to help an individual who is seeking healing or transformation in different ways in their incarnational experience or in their life.
Now, can I just stop
So
you
that's
there?
kind of
Is
the foundation of unity field healing. That's really what it's all about.
if someone comes to you with a specific malady, for example, is there a specific way to apply this particular technique, or does it just work across the board for everything?
Yes and no. So what ends up happening is, what you begin to understand with healing is that healing is actually an innate process. It's not something that is ever done to us. It's something that occurs through us. And so what we're always trying to do in healing, or as healers, is to create an environmental space or an experience that is apt to let that healing come forward from the person inside out, if you will, from the soul of the person. And so when we work with unity field healing, we kind of have to go through there's 3 sessions. So there's session 1, 2, and 3. 1 is an attunement of the DNA axis. And what happens in that session is there's a priming that takes place in this energetic structure, this chromosome, that really allows it to expand powerfully for the person who is receiving the treatment. And then in the second session, there's an attunement to the template, the light template itself. And so the pattern is kind of brought to life, if you will, or sung to life, or, becomes very, very active in the quantum DNA field of the person receiving the treatment. Then we move to session 3, and session 3 is done with intent. So this is where you might bring in a healing. For example, if a person is experiencing an illness and they want support around healing the illness and these kinds of things, that would be brought in as an intention. And then the session is done using the quantum DNA access with the template, letting the energy work around the focus or the intent of what the session is really all about. And it's interesting because over time, what I learned was it's not just about healing. Healing is a very small aspect of the transformation at hand. So much of it is about personal development and multidimensional development. And so people will often bring intentions into sessions that are not really healing focused at all. It's more about, strengthening my intuition or
Right.
developing the skill of sight or these kinds of things. And so people have all kinds of really fun and amazing experiences, both in a healing context and in a development context as well.
Well, you mentioned the visuals are much like sacred geometry of sorts,
Very
but it's
much so.
really speaking of the quantum, um, the toroidal fields and so on, it looks like to me. Can you go into that a
100%.
little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So what happens when, as a person is initiated as a healer in the technique, what happens when you're doing the session is you feel this massive torus of energy that kind of encases your body as the healer. And so it's almost like it comes down and it merges and it's working with you. And then as you go into the session to work with the person on the table, this energy becomes really activated. And also in a resonance kind of a way, the energy of the person on the table becomes active in a very similar way. And so you create this beautiful field. It's this space. And the way I kind of see it in the work is it's this magical space, like this quantum space that's created to create the potential for these transformations to occur. And so, as the healer, you're undergoing a lot of energetic attunement, I think, every time you do a session, but the person on the table is also receiving that. And
So
it was explained to me that the modality itself has a Sirian basis. So for people, you mentioned star seed, and people speak of star connections and star families and
you
all
knew
these
I
things.
was going to go there. I was there. I was on the edge. That's next.
So yeah, so it's kind of it's knowledge or wisdom that really has a foundation in Syrian knowledge, and the Syrians, if you will, the Syrian beings kind of support the work. And it's really fun because we'll see sometimes like people who are practitioners will have clients receiving the work, and they'll say, who was that big blue being that was standing
Yes,
beside me?
thank
So
you.
they'll, and they may not be someone who's ever experienced an energy healing session. So they're a little excited or sometimes a little freaked out by that, but there's so much love in the space that it's never a threatening or a scary experience for them. They're always very
I
excited.
I have to tell you, I'm grinning from ear to ear because when I've done sessions, though I've not used your technique specifically, but I see that something similar when I do the work that I do. And just recently, so many people have had these big blue beings. And I've been like, okay, have you been to the Syrian library? Like, where you're you're coming in with these big blue beings. They're like, I've heard about the big blue beings. I said, yes. So you're speaking to that again. Please keep going. This is fascinating. What explain your experience of the big blue beings and
Well,
your experience with
absolutely.
Syrian?
So many people, it's true. So many people are having these unusual experiences with blue energy, blue light, and the blue beings these days. And so it's kind of interesting. The funny thing about the unity field work is I was developing the whole technique. I was being given information long before it ever had any kind of a Syrian connection in my mind. It was kind of revealed a few years after the work was developed. And I think there was a purpose for that. They kind of knew that I was comfortable doing energy healing. Like as a physician, I'm always walking between the two worlds of healing. And so, to begin to teach about energy healing was first a big step. And of course, I had to integrate that as a person in my little world. And then the concept of working with star beings or spirit beings or those kinds of things was a little bit too out there, I think, for me at the beginning. And then so slowly, as I settled into the work, they introduced themselves to me. But they didn't introduce themselves to make me aware of their work in Unity Field Healing. They introduced themselves to me because they wanted to do monthly transmissions. And so, in the act of revealing themselves in this way, they explain that they have been working behind the scenes the whole time with the development of Unity Field Healing and helping evoke the memories and all the things that go along with bringing that into the world, if you will. And then, so that was in about 2019. So they began a series of monthly transmissions, which continued to this date, and they do these beautiful meditations every month. And there's a teaching that goes along with each of the transmissions, a light language transmission that's given, and then a meditation. And so the meditations are focused on developing aspects of what they now term the diamond light body, or the crystalline diamond light body. And this is part of the energy development that takes place as this 24th chromosome becomes so activated and really comes online, if you will, or begins to expand in its communication. And so they said the transmissions were really for people who, what they explained at the time when they first presented themselves was, there are so many people who are really well developed in information and energy, but the transition that a human being has to go through to do this integration is quite a profound event. And so they wanted to be there to support people at the level of that transformation, because they said they, from their side of consciousness, they can see things and do things to help us that are really hard for us to see and achieve on this side of the veil, if you will.
It's like they're
And
helpers
so
in the background with the technology, but also in your dream time, like when you're sleeping and things, right?
100%, absolutely. And that's, it's often when they powerfully work with us. Or the meditations, what I find, are kind of catalytic energies. And so they trigger, and then there's an integration period that follows, and they'll often support us in our sleep and in our dreams to do that integrative work. And but
So
they
do
had to
you
kind of
see
make
them? Do
themselves
they
more
come to you?
conscious. Sorry?
I'm sorry, we have an overlay. Do you see them? Do they come to you? Are you now in a space where you can commune openly, or through meditation openly? I'm sure
In
you get
meditation,
downloads.
if I do sessions, energy healing sessions, sometimes I'll see them half interior. It's a strange space because you're in this really, um, like, it's a brain heart coherence. It's kind of like a very deep state of relaxation. And when you're in that space, and if you do open your eyes, you'll often see energetic things. So sometimes I'll see them half physically and then half in consciousness. But the majority of my contact with them or experience is through vision from inside. What happens in the meditations or the transmissions is I'm shown a whole series of energetic events. And I'm kind of like a reporter. I'm just describing what's happening. And that ends up being the process that guides the transmission. So, I will say, I'm seeing this and this is what's happening, kind of thing. And then people will have their own experiences, of course, during the transmission, but it ends up becoming the guidance for what the transmission is. And
Now,
often in that time, of course, I'll see them participate in different ways in the transmission. Or if I go into a space where I'm meditating to ask questions and those kinds of things, then I don't always see them. It's more of a direct communication. So I think it takes energy to do that somehow. Like, they reserve it for moments when there's a value in doing it or a purpose in doing it. And but during healing sessions, they're always very present. And during the transmissions, they're always very present.
I know what you mean by the energy and the need of energy during that, or the need of pulling in and getting into a space that accommodates that specifically. I think what you said here is really important, and I need to point this out, that people receive really well when you're in that kind of coherent space. So you talked about a heart and soul, spirit coherency there. Can you go into that a little bit more? Because I think that's just absolutely so vital for people to easily move into this beautiful kind of setting. And that's really what it is. It's a setting the stage for receiving.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the whole value in learning to meditate or learning to kind of still yourself is, it can't be overemphasized in value, especially when you're evolving spiritually or you're kind of going through the experience of awakening in different ways. So much of what we receive is from inside. And the outer world can be very interesting. And of course, it's where we all live in a physical way, but it's a distraction sometimes to having multidimensional experiences. So this access that we have to spirit, and we all have it, no matter who we are or what we think about spiritual things, or, everybody is a spiritual being. It becomes kind of the whole concept of that becomes kind of funny when you start understanding the nature of things, because you realize you cannot not be spiritual, no matter what your life looks like or what your
I
character is as
agree.
a person.
Yes, it's true.
So what happens is you really start to integrate that. You start living more inside out. You realize you're not a human looking for spiritual experiences. You're actually a soul living in a body, having human experiences. And so it kind of reverses our way of thinking at the beginning. But in order to have more direct communication or more conscious experiences, we have to learn to still the mind and the emotions. So if you think of ourselves as a body or a temple, we have a physical body, we have etheric energy that flows through that body and creates energy structure, the chakras and these kinds of things. We have an emotional field of energy, which we term the emotional body, and a mental body. And the mental body is not just the brain, it's a whole field of energy that's part of the human order. And so we can be busy in all of those things. And so if we're distracted by experiences through the senses in the physical world, it's pulling us outward in terms of focus or concentration. When we close our eyes, when we still our mind, when we still our emotions and we go inside, we begin to develop a pattern of energy in our body where the brain and the heart are in a coherent space. It's like they're really in parallel, and one is not winning over the other. It's not like mind over emotion or thought over feeling, these kinds of things. All those struggles kind of dissolve away, and we're in a space that can be better described as essence or pure being or presence. And so when we're in that space and this coherence develops within us, magical things will sometimes happen. So if anybody has ever had a past life memory, for example, if that came to you as a vision, like a dream-like vision in your mind, you were in a really coherent space when you received that. And so people sometimes think they can't achieve these states of being, which isn't true. Everybody can learn to do this.
Thank
It's
you
not,
for saying that. Thank you,
yeah.
because that's so important, especially right now. People are like, oh,
A
I
hundred
never get
percent.
there.
And it's
People
never
need
been
to.
more important to do it than right now, because there's so much perturbation in the external energy fields from everything going on in the world and the way people are relating to that, feeling and thinking and experiencing all those crazy crises that are going on around the world. So for a person to learn to still themselves inside becomes a real precious jewel of an experience. But it's also in that state, as it works out, that we have these inner experiences, these teachings. And so music can be, if people have struggle with that, I find music is probably the most direct and simple way of teaching the body to relax. And so there's so much beautiful music available now, like meditative type music that really lets you relax purely in your body, where you feel the tension in your body truly dissolve away. That kind of state is what will allow a person to slip into that coherence more purely.
I love that. I've been working with people with theta waves, and
Yeah.
also some of the, I'm sure you feel this, but the flute music, the beautiful ambient music, and then the flute music, all these things that are sort of music of the spheres, if you will, that bring people into that, you call it a coherent state. And it's, yes, so the coherency, once you have that still space, then what?
So then it's kind of the soul takes over. And so what happens in that space is really what the soul wants to bring forth or deliver. And so as we kind of go through this process of energy awakening and consciousness awakening and all that kind of stuff, we have to prepare ourselves to the understanding that things operate differently in the world we're moving into. So I always tease people. I say, in the back, we were very linear. Everything was lists. Like, in order, if you wanted to achieve something, you had lists. You had your to-do list and everything was numbered out. As we go into the new energy, that kind of order in the mind can create interference with the soul's path. And so what we have to learn to do is be still and begin to make decisions and choices following an intuitive sense of awareness. And so, for example, if there are 3 things on your list and you ask your soul, what's the most important thing for me to achieve today? Or where should I go today? It may say number 2, or it may say, forget your list, do this.
Yes, amen. Forget the list altogether. Just follow your spirit.
Exactly. And so when we start doing that, at first it's kind of playful and kind of fun, but it actually becomes a compass. And so you learn to rely on it so profoundly that you don't do anything in any other way. Like it's really kind of becomes the basis of all your decisions. And then what ends up happening is in that space of following that intuition, which is so much easier to receive when we're more still in our being. Like if my mind is not taking over and trying to make what it's thinking important, if I'm really quiet and still, then I can hear more purely what the intuition is saying. And so there's a whole development that goes along with that. It's something we all have to like practice and experiment with and learn about just by having experiences. But eventually that voice becomes really clear and you know when it's speaking. And so what then ends up happening is the intuition has access to a whole field of knowledge and wisdom that's not present in the mind. So say, for example, your soul wanted to bring you towards having a certain experience. And so you may think, well, the important things I need to do today are this, but all of a sudden you find yourself watching a video, or you find yourself receiving a phone call and having a conversation. And something in that moment triggers you to investigate something that leads you to get excited about an opportunity. And in doing that, you allow yourself to go through with the intuition that is guided by that experience. And so you may end up then doing something or making a choice to do something that you would never have done on purely logical basis. It had to be triggered by that kind of synchronicity or that kind of moment. And then what happens is when you listen to that and follow through, your soul might introduce you to someone who has knowledge or who has experience or who can teach you something or who connects you to the next person that will help you on your path. And spirit knows all these things. Like it kind of has the overview while we're living in a really condensed, specific aspect of the experience. But if our soul, for example, wants us to meet an individual for some purpose on our path, they know how to coordinate a connection. And so if we're listening in this way, those things unfold. But if we dismiss all of that kind of intuitive experience, then we keep closing the door to those opportunities. And the soul is really patient. It's not like it says, oh, I'm going to give up on this one or whatever. It will keep trying and it will keep, creating opportunities for us to learn and to practice. But as we move into this new space, so much about the future is going to be led in that kind of a paradigm. And so you become aware that you're not limited to what you already know. You're not limited to your knowledge as an individual. You're part of something much bigger, a whole field of consciousness and a whole array of beings of consciousness that will guide and help you. And you start to learn to operate from the knowingness that you're part of something bigger than your simple self. And so that's the magic of this kind of quantum awakening, because you start to live your life that way. And that becomes very exciting. And of course, we all have fun experiences as we play and learn to operate there.
So I love this explanation. I love this conversation. I'm grateful for your presence here today. And your way of coming into this knowledge is perfect because, some people seem like they were born with that bent. And here you were in a very linear fashion most of your life. And then you had this awakening. So at what point did you understand, okay, I'm on a whole different side of the fence now, based on what I'm going through? At what point did that kind of really settle in and you say, I can't turn back?
Probably when the Sirian beings came to me in the meditation and told me what they wanted me to do going forward. That was a big pivot point.
That would be a big profound moment. So did
But
they
but to be
say to
honest,
you,
what was really revealed and what became clear to me through time was, because as I was going through this, I kind of thought, am I supposed to focus all my energy and time specifically on this? Like obviously it seemed to be important. And I thought it's an incredible knowledge that could be so helpful to humanity in so many wonderful ways. But am I supposed to just like drop everything else and simply do this? And they said, in time. They always kept saying to me, in time. And what they wanted me to understand was, instead of being in one world or the other, it's really important to be a bridge. And so they explained to me in one of the meditations where I was getting a little frustrated about having to make decisions and trying to figure out my life and all that stuff. They said, just relax and calm down. It's not a race. And they said, it's all going to unfold in perfect divine timing. And you're so on the mark, don't worry about it. And let go of that anxiety and that tension. It was really healing for me to receive that kind of guidance, because it let me know that I didn't have to get worked up about it, which is a natural thing to do as a human being. And what they helped me understand was, think of yourselves in terms of energy. And it's really important for humans to understand the seeding of energy. And so, for example, they would say, if everybody that was enlightened and growing in energy and consciousness isolated into a little community and lived in a bubble on an island, it would be harder for that energy to impact the world at large. So what happens instead is we're like acupuncture points. And there are people awakening in every country all over the planet, having profound experiences and integrating vibrational packets of energy and quanta of energy that they're developing within their energy system. And they're holding this energy in these places all over the planet, and they become resonators. So they're like vibrating and singing, if you will. And in the act of that happening, the energy field, what they speak to me about in terms of the crystalline field of energy that is the earth, that field of energy is triggered or enhanced or made to vibrate by this kind of energy. And so we're going through this process of developing a whole new quantum rich field of energy and knowledge and potential. And it has to, we have to be patient with it the way a farmer is in a field. Like you plant your seeds, but they don't grow tomorrow. They grow in the spring, or they grow later in the season. And so you have to get really cognizant of the fact that many of the things you're doing when you're bringing energy and information in is a seeding process. It's not going to immediately bear fruit. It's going to be planted, and then it has to be nurtured. And in the act of nurturing it, it then takes life. And as it seeds and spreads and takes life, then the potential for it to expand happens very naturally and organically. And in fact, with the work that I was taught to do, the Unity field work, they said to me, it's an organic process. You don't need to worry about this. You don't have to publicize it and buy ads and do all this kind of stuff. They said, don't take that approach. It's not your nature to do that. And it's not necessary for this work. What will happen is it's a platter. You present it, you just make it available. And the people who respond to the work will be people who connect to it through intuition and synchronicity. And they'll be drawn into it by their own heart. And it will create a really beautiful, natural, organic unfoldment of the work. And I've been teaching it now for over 5 years. And that's exactly what's happened. There are about 500 practitioners now around the planet. But every single person has been drawn to the work through some kind of magical moment. And they bring to the work the magic of their own alchemy, of their own spirit. And so it comes to life in all kinds of fabulous ways. And so it's just been breathtaking to watch that unfold, but having the guidance or the awareness to be of that mind about its development was really, really helpful. And so this is why the bridging becomes so vital for us to understand. And I see a lot of people kind of get panicky about this. They start awakening spiritually and they think they have to understand everything in one day. And, they see people who've achieved a certain level of skill or gifts or knowledge or abilities, and they think, they're so far ahead of me or this kind of stuff. It's not the way it is at all. There's a timing to everything, and people wake up at the perfect time for their soul's directive, and their soul will call them to purpose in a very perfect way. And so people can relax around all that stuff. I always encourage people not to get panicky about it, because it's just a waste of time and energy and just a lesson in the end.
I love it. You're anchoring in the very things I keep telling my people, and they're
Brilliant.
they're going to hear it yet again from another source. And I love this. So unity field feeling, that's a really beautiful set of wording. It's a nice resonance. And so if you can look at the entirety of what you're bringing to the table, how would you sum it up? What is this unity field healing? What does it do?
The whole process of unity field healing is a restorative connection to the quantum consciousness of your highest self. So people use I am, your I am presence or your higher self, oversoul. There's soul, oversoul. People use all kinds of different terms to mean the same thing. The soul to me is the part of our consciousness that comes forth for experience. So the soul is the part that's born over and over and over again through incarnational experiences, learning, experiencing, enriching knowledge, making some mistakes that we make, all the things that are part of that pathway. And the higher self is the part of consciousness that doesn't experience the duality that the soul is exposed to. And so as we go through this integration, it's like we're moving up in energy and consciousness closer and closer to this higher self aspect of who we are. And so the funny thing about the ascension that became so obvious to me after a short time was a lot of people think about ascension as rising in energy or rising in consciousness. And it almost comes with this lift off kind of a feeling like we're leaving or we're going somewhere else. But what was explained to me was it's a deeply integrative process. It's the higher energy is actually coming down and integrating into the physical world. It's the exact opposite of leaving the planet. It's integrating that knowledge and energy into the physical world and letting it become so well anchored in the world that we can grow into an ascended civilization. And so the purpose of all this is to create the consciousness and the energy field that will become the place where humanity will grow into an ascended civilization or an awakened civilization. And that's not going to happen, in 24 hours. That's going to happen over the course of a few generations. But we're at the very beginning and very actively integrated into the momentum of what that really is all about. And that's truly what's happening now on the planet.
Well,
So
you're
this
being
work
used
is
as
there
a
to
as a
help
way shower.
humans go through, sorry?
You're being used as a way shower. You're being used as a focal
100%.
point at this time.
Yeah, 100%. And so this work is really all about supporting humans going through that process and to help them receive the gifts of grace and attunement that can kind of facilitate the transition or to allow them to experience the release and the healing that's potential for us to receive and experience at this point in time. And I often say to people don't need unity field healing. This process is so natural and so organic in its nature that it's happening with or without any kind of a technique or process. But the techniques are given to us because they're very powerful tools that we can use to receive grace and guidance in the process of what we're living. So they have a really important role to play, but at the same time, the process is happening with or without them in a strange way, but they're gifts that are given to us to work with for that purpose.
I love that. I love that they're gifts. And I just feel like there's this whole host of, like, an auditorium full of blue beings. I know that you have a blue backdrop, but I feel a host of blue beings all around you. Like they're all in the audience, like, yes, we're here. We're here. And we're bringing this transmission in right now live.
Exactly.
And I feel it. I feel it. It's beautiful. And
That's
so I
I
keep
love your
going
sensitivity
back.
to it. That's amazing.
I keep going back as you're speaking to, and I'm serious about this. My heart is moved to the Sirian library as you're talking. It makes me very emotional, actually. So, have you been to the Sirian library? Have you had your own spiritual experiences to kind of integrate there from the
I've
past?
been brought to what I perceive as a temple. It's kind of like an etheric temple space. It's crystalline in its essence, like it has a living light that is the nature of the structure. And sometimes when I do healing sessions, I will see that it's almost like that forms around us in the healing space. But this was a different kind of an experience. It was like I was taken on a journey, if you will, or kind of taken in consciousness to this place. And so I've seen that. And when you're there, you it's kind of funny because it's a library in essence, but everything is living. So it's really hard to explain this, but it's almost like if you touch the temple, you receive the knowledge you need. It's not like a book, or it's not like you have to go open up a volume and hand through pages and read some kind of a paragraph. It's almost like when you're there and you're in contact with the energy, not what you think you need. It's kind of like feeding you exactly what you need, like even more precise than you could think about it. So that was my only experience of being in what I would call a library, or kind of a knowledge base in Sirian energy. I've
Now, is
had other
there
experiences where I've gone into Akashic records and things, but it was a little different than this one. This was the purest kind of Sirian energy experience I would put into that category.
is there difference between the Sirian energy and, let's say, Pleiadian or Taigetan energy, what, or Arcturian energy? Why Sirian?
There is. And the interesting thing is, at first I thought, well, this is Sirian focused. It's the Sirian beings who are part of it. But it's not limited to that. There's often times when other star families participate in the work. And the way, it's funny because I had an experience with Kryon when he gave me a personal channel during a retreat experience. And he explained what I'm remembering here is core knowledge that came with the star mothers from the time of ancient Lemuria, and that I worked in the Temple of Rejuvenation in Lemuria. So that's why I have access, I guess, to all of this understanding. But what he explained at that time was when we were first born as souls onto the planet through the experience of Lemuria and the Pleiadian star mothers, that created the foundational energy for the divine human being. It was almost like the setting of the template for human divinity. And it was the Pleiadian mothers who introduced the 24th chromosome to humanity. So as they bore children and had children on Earth, these children carried this star access, this 24th chromosome. And so they taught, they became teachers and way showers, and they developed a community that kind of flourished and became what we know today as the modern human being. And there's even genetic references to this. Like there's a time when the human being, like the pre Homo sapien human being, had 24 pairs of chromosomes. And something happened at around 200,000 to 50,000 years ago where the genetics of two chromosomes merged together, creating chromosome 2. And Kryon has said in his channeling that this correlates to the arrival of the Pleiadian mothers. Now, that's esoteric knowledge, so it can't be proven, but it is what Kryon has actually said. And it correlates so well with the visions that I have personally had. So I do believe it wholeheartedly to be true. And so at that time, it was kind of like the Pleiadians can be considered our parental lineage. It's almost like they're our parents when you think in a galactic concept. But there are many star families that have other contributions, and the Pleiadians were seeded by other levels of civilization, by the Arcturians and so on and so forth. So all of these beings come into play. And I was shown at the beginning of the 24th chromosome, there were mothers that were not only Pleiadian, there were star mothers from all the constellations and star systems that came together and sung into being the matrix for the 24th chromosome that would be the kind of like the epicenter of humanity. It would be like the core pattern, and then we're fractals of the pattern. Like each one of us as a soul has a fractal of that energy. And so whether that is a metaphoric vision or it's something that actually took place in the stars and before humans came into being, I'm not sure, but it's the way it was shown to me. And so all of these lineages play a role, and they're ancestors of light to the human race. And so the Sirians are specific kind of in their nature, their personality, their knowledge isn't the right word. It's knowledge, but it's wisdom. It's knowledge with wisdom altogether.
It's
And
true.
so it's,
Yes, it's so they're sort of the way shores of the Lemurian time, right? So
yeah,
we talk about the Lemurian seed crystals
yeah,
holding the librarian energy, so to speak, and the Lemurians being the teachers, the seed planters of this time. And what you just said as a vision, it makes a lot of sense because it brings forth that now space of then, but
Yeah.
it's the now then, bringing it into the flourishing of that seed in this time frame and pulling together that beauty of homogenation of the wisdom
Yeah,
keepers. And
that's
here you are bringing forth the knowledge as the flow through with
right.
your unity field healing. And
It's
people,
very, very interesting because Kryon said at one point in time that Lemuria will resurface. It will not resurface in a physical way. It will come back into consciousness, and people will begin to remember things about their incarnations there. And but what he said was Lemuria was something that was a seeding for a future potential. And he said, when it comes back into being, it won't be with the simplicity with which it existed in the time. It will surface through a human race that has become so complex in consciousness, but it will restore. It will be a restorative consciousness. It will help us remember the original seeding of wisdom that came. And so, as that bubbles up and infiltrates human consciousness, and as each one of us does our little part the best way we can, just in manifesting the nature of that consciousness as human beings, it will become the foundational energy of the planet again. And so if you think about ascension and the preparation of the planet to kind of grow into an ascended civilization in the future, you can kind of see the wisdom in those words from Kryon as well. And as we surface this with the knowledge we now have, we've been through the light dark experience, the polarity experience. We've all had many, many lifetimes and very rich experiences, some very painful ones, but they're all still there. And we live through them all. And you begin to realize none of them end us. They're all transitional, like all the world's a stage. Shakespeare had it right. And so we live through these incarnations, but there's a purpose and an evolutionary quality to why we're living those things. And as the energy resets from duality back into a unity consciousness through this ascension, the nature of human beings will transform. And so, and we
that'll
see
be
this in our
preferable.
children in the practice.
We'll take that
Yeah,
change in nature, but also in the knowingness, in going back into that heart space of who we really be. And so
exactly.
your course teaching, it, it can be for people that want to become practitioners, but it's also for people that are looking for that bridge, as you say, and also the healing itself. So you have something coming up here soon. Can you talk about that a little bit, where people can find?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm coming to Rochester to do a Unity Field Healing Practitioners training on the weekend of 19 through 21 April. And the it's interesting. When I first started teaching this work, Winifred, it was funny because I thought everybody who came to do this was going to be a healer. Like I thought people who have healing practices or do Reiki work or chiropractors or nurses of different kinds. And I was surprised that about half the people fit into that category, but the other half of people were all over the place, like air traffic controllers, electrical technicians, like teachers, all kinds of different people. And I had a very powerful experience after the first teaching. This lady came to me and she said, John, I didn't really know your work. And she said, I'm not really into energy. I'm interested in energy things, but I'm just an elementary school teacher. And I had no big awareness of energy. And she said, but I was so unavailable to say no. I had to do this and I didn't know what it was all about. And so I love when people say that because it's their heart that's bringing them into the experience. And so, but she said, I'm a school teacher. And she said, I teach really young kids. And she said, it's become really, really difficult. And she said, they're brilliant and they're awakened in all kinds of ways, but they're so busy and chaotic. And it's so hard to have any kind of order in the classroom. And so she said, since I've done the training, I've learned to start my day by feeling the template. So she said, I do a little meditation at the beginning of my day. I feel the energy come in. I let the energy work with me. I let it work with the room. And she said, it has completely transformed my classroom. And so she said, before everybody would talk all at once. Now people speak, the kids will speak, they'll make space for the next person to speak. And then when they stop, the next person who has something important to say will flow into the conversation. And she said, it's completely ordered the energy and they are aware of the field somehow. And so she said, it's been really, really magical. But what that did for me was it opened my mind. I realized people will do this for all kinds of different reasons. And so since that point in time, I would say about 60% of the people who do the training are practitioners, and 40% will never do energy healing specifically, but they
That's
do all
perfect.
kinds of beautiful things on the earth.
They're bringing their it through their
100%.
essence and where they're meeting the world. Now, you also have a
100%.
very, very special event coming up and meeting the Sirian Blue Light Collective. When is that?
Yeah, so Kryon reached out to me earlier or at the end of 2023 and asked to create together a very special channeling event with the Sirian Blue White Collective and with Kryon. And so in September, it's been scheduled for September 22nd and 3rd, I think are the dates. It's the third weekend in September in Rochester, New York. And it will be with Lee Carroll and myself and Monica Morani, just three of us. And it'll be a channeling intensive. It's 2 days. And people register for the 2 days. It's kind of like a whole channeling event. And so so
I'm
that's
so
up for
excited.
registration.
This is
Yeah,
this
that's
is like in my backyard. This is so amazing. I'm really excited. That's going to be a powerful one. Now let me ask you, why Rochester?
well, it's interesting because Lee wanted to come to the northeast part of the continent, and I'm in Ottawa in Canada, so it would be a very natural place to do it, but we felt it was right to do it in the US. And so I set it up there in Rochester, and I have a very good friend of mine, Sheila Tillich, who
Yes.
is one of the Kryon hosts locally. So we've developed a really nice relationship over the years. And so I thought this is great because Sheila will be able to support us in creating the event locally too. So it all flowed really synchronistically. Just a really beautiful thing. But it was chosen synchronistically. I wasn't given a specific reason why Rochester, but I knew it was the right place to host it. So
Well,
that's what I listened
definitely
to.
an international place, and it's a place where
Yeah.
there's people that are open, but there's also a nearby vortex here, and all of this area not only could use the healing, but it is also a crystalline bed here. There's a flow from where you are all the way down, like a energy flow, a pattern from what I can see. So I'm super excited that you're coming here, not once, but twice, and under such beautiful circumstances to share your gift and all that you have. Now, is there something specific that you think will be a focal point for that event? Is there something that is kind of lining up with the Sirian collective for that event?
It's interesting because I just started tuning into the energy of the event. So the beginning, it was kind of like an awareness that it was to be created. As we go forward, I don't yet know the presentations. I don't yet know the kind of presentations that will be given or the essence of the messages. And I may not know that from the Sirian perspective until we're there and delivering them. It's often the way it is with Kryon as well. Lee has no idea what he's getting into until Kryon starts to speak. But the history of Kryon and the work I do is Kryon has tied this work back to the Temple of Rejuvenation. And I know we're at a time where we're going to be anchoring in really powerful healing potentials and knowledge. And these messages are going to be about the interface with the crystalline grid and how that knowledge is going to be integrated and woven into the space and the time we're in. And so that's kind of the essence that I'm getting from what the purpose of the event is, but there'll be a lot more to share on that as we go forward. I'm just starting to receive right now.
Well, I'm excited for you, and I'm excited for us, and I'm excited for everyone that will make it a point to come and experience that along with everyone live.
Absolutely.
So
We'd love to see you all there.
yes, yes. And your website is unityfieldhealing.com.
Correct.
And you have the Unity Field Healing book out that people can get on the website along with purchasing and experiencing your work. So there are practitioners you mentioned around the world, but it's also on the Unity Field Healing website. So unityfieldhealing.com.
That's it. And access to all these events will be on the events tab. So if people tab into the events section, there'll be direct links to all these events as well.
I think after this eclipse that's upcoming, people will be flocking for these kinds of things.
For sure.
So the eclipse is going by here and it's going to go by there too. You up
100%.
there.
We're both going to be in a full eclipse that day. So
How do you take this? What do you think is happening in this eclipse?
the way I perceive it, I've kind of seen some information that I'm not super knowledgeable about astrology. I love it, but I've never spent the time to focus and learn, the skill of astrology other than elementary things. But I understand the powerful impact of the alignment of galactic bodies and the energies they each carry and how that imposes itself as a blueprint, if you will, or print upon consciousness. And so this time is really powerful. Like, it's funny because I think sometimes these things get hyped up, like every every
Yeah.
star event becomes a big thing, but this is really a big one. This is an energy phenomena that I feel it as a reset. And what's going to happen is slowly, and this is already happening, like it's not going to start on the day of the eclipse. It's been happening now for weeks and it's going to continue for a while, is there's almost this impatience that's growing in humanity for all the things that seem to be stuck, that are trying so hard to go forward. And we feel like we've been in this holding pattern. Like there's so much forward momentum and everything is, the brakes have just been put on. And people are feeling a frustration, like this agitation. And the agitation is kind of a necessary energy to create the momentum through the wall of this resistance. And so what we're going to start seeing going forward is alignment of things that have to be put back in order. And so as conscious human beings, it's really important we come to terms with our relationship with nature and with the planet. It's really important that we begin to restore a sense of humanity and dignity to the way that humans interface and relate with each other. It's important for us to understand we're not all supposed to have the same beliefs. We're supposed to revel in the differences that we bring to the table in different ways. And so much of that kind of, I mean, I could go on and on for half an hour about these kinds of elements, but the point of it is we feel like we've been stuck. We know this, we want it, but we feel there's been a blockage or resistance to it. And so it's almost like we're being held in the energy to really feel it and really see what it's like not to have the other side. And so this kind of eclipse to me is a breakthrough. It's like moving through that energy and really hitting momentum to move forward and to reorient a lot of these things and to get onto a track that will really take humanity forward in a powerful way. And so over the next 6 months and a year after this eclipse, there'll be all kinds of planetary things that happen. Some will seem chaotic and crazy making. Others will seem really about time, kind of a feeling. But there'll be this waxing and waning of consciousness as we reorient the planet in that way. There's times when we look at what's happening on the planet right now, we almost want to give up on certain days. You kind of think, are we ever going to make it through? Like, come on. And but this will be the needed reprieve. I think people will start to feel it. And I always say to people, it's really, really important. Like the magnitude of what we're doing and what's actually happening through this ascension process is so vast and so big that what we're living now is a necessary part of the transition. It's the time when we integrate the energies that keep vibrational state low. And we have to surface them. We have to expose them. We have to expose ourselves to them. We have to go through the integrative process of fixing some of them and all that stuff. And so that's a transition that has to happen over a span of time. But that span can feel heart-wrenching when it seems to be going on for a long time, and especially difficult when it seems to be stuck. And so that's kind of how I think most people have been feeling. Like when I talk to friends and colleagues and people who have, really, developed knowledge of energy and their own personal experiences, it's a common theme that a lot of people have been feeling. And so I think that's how I see this eclipse. It's kind of like that bust open of the energy so that we're going to really feel like we're moving forward again. And it's going to create some very positive and needed change, transformation, and we'll feel a bit more supported in the effort of moving forward in consciousness. So,
Well, since
hallelujah.
they've created states of emergency from there to here, I think it's a good opportunity to take time to be still, like you were saying in the beginning, and also using some of the tools like the techniques that you're offering along with the visual is going to be very helpful to people. It's going to be very helpful for them to take that time and integrate and go through the processes. So to visit the Unity Field Healing website, you'll find these things there, and this is a great time. It couldn't be better, honestly, to take that in, because if they do shut things down, which they're seemingly intending to do, and they're here anyway, they are manning state troopers and things with food and water for people that'll be stranded on the highway and so on. So just be.
Yeah,
If you can't go anywhere, if there's nothing to do, if the electricity goes out, be sure you get
exactly.
these things first and download them first so that you can listen on your device and use them. And I keep seeing like the visual of your visuals that you brought forth as such a beautiful way of imprinting into the biofield what's happening. And the biofield is, as you're saying, is setting up for a vibrational reset, a shift of almost like a bridge through time, literally. And it's
Mhm.
kind of like you're skipping, like the crust is moving and you're skipping a little.
Oh, it's a
So
beautiful image. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing. Beautiful.
I think that's happening here. Maybe that's why it's Rochester. I think because
Yay.
that shelf is moving, right? So we might get a little rumble, but you have these beautiful offerings, and couldn't be a better timing. I mean that. There's no mistake in how things come forward. This is perfect timing. So I'm looking forward to this, and I hope everyone will join. I hope we rock Rochester.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. So, Dr. John Ryan, he started out in the allopathic field, but was actually being set up for something so much greater. And bringing that back, can I just ask you, how do your allopathic counterparts take your work? They must know. So,
Yeah, they do now.
how do they take it?
They're very okay with it for them, like really for the most part. There's the in medicine, in the hospital environment, a lot of people will not bring up things without a purpose for doing it. And people aren't like petty and like, even if they don't, for example, ascribe or believe or understand something, they don't tend to be petty. They're open-minded enough to say, well, everybody has their own experience, their own interests, their own passions. We have to let everybody kind of be that way. And so there's a tremendous sense of acceptance that perhaps isn't as common in the world at large, but it really is, I find, present in the medical community in a nice way, which is good. I have people who ask me questions about what I'm doing, who sometimes they've had no experience or knowledge. And so they're really at the beginning of learning things, but just their very interest is an earmark for what's happening. Like the fact that they're open-minded. The young students that I work with, I work a lot with trainees, and I see really incredible evolution in some of these children and the kids and how they're going to come to life in medicine and how the kinds of things they'll do in the future. And even how medicine itself is evolving. Like sometimes we think of allopathic medicine as very different from holistic and energy-based medicine, but we're going to come to understand they're part of the same system and they're going to merge together. It's kind of funny because I work in an aspect of medicine that already is energy. So, for example, like I'll read an MRI, but what an MRI is a song of magnetic energy sung to the body, received back in signals and turned into a picture. So right there already, that's energy. And I'll say that, that sometimes to the radiologists, they'll say, oh, we're the first energy doctors because we're already working within an energy consciousness. And but it's all evolved so natural through physics that we don't think in those terms. We still see it as a very allopathic approach. And but as we move forward, of course, we're going to understand more the innate energetic aspects of the human field and how to trigger changes in the energy field to help create healing and how to create changes in genetic presence to be able to evoke healing of even really well-established kind of genetic patterns and diseases. So science will merge into this world, and this world will merge into science slowly. And so there's a fair number of people who are open-minded and understand that even if they're not conscious of it, they're aware of it at the level of their soul.
You're
And I
seeding
was,
them.
yeah, like I was at the beginning, I kind of thought this is going to be a bad experience. I thought everybody's going to think I'm crazy and all this kind of stuff. There are a few, yeah, you have these weird experiences every once in a while, but it's not really been the general state of things. And I'm really grateful for that. So
I'm happy to hear this. Now, I've been on the forefront of medical intuition, and we've always been saying we're the human x-rays, we're the human MRI machines. However, moving forward, this is going to marry together. And I'm
yeah,
so happy to hear you say this and your feedback on what you're seeing in the field, because this is moving quickly now, and light and sound healing is going to come forth very, very quickly. In the next 5 years, we're going to take leaps and bounds as
yeah,
to, your particular, I hate to say this because your job may become obsolete to
yeah,
that technology in a very short period of time, but then you're going to be off doing these things, these other things that the Syrian
exactly.
family has you doing.
And helping
It,
others do the same.
yeah, it's all going to shift in a beautiful way, and we are coming to that zone of oneness and seeing it actually merge together. And so the leaps forward are just in front of us, as you're saying.
Yeah,
So everyone, I can't say thank you enough for listening. We have Dr. John Ryan. He is the author of Unity Field Healing, and he is the founder of Unity Field Healing. So you can visit in person with him in his series here in Rochester, New York, upcoming in April. And then you have to come out for the big event in September. And we will be here holding space, anchoring and channeling together. So
beautiful.
it's really been a pleasure having you with us today. I feel like I've gone home for a minute, and I appreciate this. And thank you so much. And I hope we get to talk again, maybe before September. And
Sure.
this has been a wonderful transmission and sharing. Thank you for your work here on Earth. And thank you for being willing to take that leap in the midst of what seems like a density or a dense world at the time you began this work. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you for sharing this time together. And a big heartfelt thanks to all the listeners, and blessings to everyone.
Very good. All right, everybody, go jolly, as I already say, and go out and make somebody else's life brighter. Thank you so much, Dr. John Ryan, Unity Field Healing, right here.
My pleasure.